In chess, nobody wants to get pushed around or dance to the opponent's tune. When you feel that this is about to happen, it's very important to try and find some counterplay. In this video, we'll talk about not losing heart when playing worse position. There might be counterplay. Counterplay is basically putting some pressure to the opponent even if you're down in material. You have lesser space, have passive position, vulnerable king safety, and many disadvantages. Many times, continuing to fight by being aggressive is a game changer for you to hold on or hold your ground to equalize and even win. Though some positions require patient defense. In other words, you have nothing better to do than try to hang on. The idea of creating your own play, usually in a new area of the board, is something that should always be on your mind. At times, counterplay needs only few preparatory moves to become reality. At other times, a sacrifice might be called for. Either way, it's well worth the tempo spent or the material given up to get your own plans into action. So how do we create counterplay? How do we learn to strike back even if our position at times is inferior to our opponents? Let me give you two A's. Active plus activity. Now, this is very easy to remember. Active and activity. In other words, we need to keep our pieces active and create play somewhere else. Even if our position is worse, try to find ways to make your pieces as active as possible. Yes, you may retreat and defend your position at times, but with some perfect timing, by all means, keep your pieces active and put pressure on your opponent in some parts of the board. So again, active and activity. This is my game in Lichess. I play black here. This position presents an opposite side castling. Clearly, white has the edge in the opening going into the middle game here in this position. It appears that white is faster in development. Pawn storm is already coming and rook is already positioned on g1 to put some pressure there on the king side. And there's also centralized knight and a good outpost in the middle. So in other words, these are big pluses for white. For me, on the other hand, I'm behind in development. Look at the bishop on c8 and the two rooks are sleeping. But I will not just sit like a duck waiting for white to come and get me. I can create counterplays by making my pieces active. The first step is to play queen to a5. Not only it removes the queen from the pin, it also makes it active and also putting some pressure on white's king. So that's activity. Now, active and activity. Now, king to b1 has been played. I play c5. Trying to open the file. My idea is to put my rook here and develop my bishop somewhere else. Okay, so if white captures this, I have knight takes c5, and will have centralized knight on e4, making my knights more active. So white did not consider capturing that. Instead, they played a more aggressive move, queen to h4. Now I had this opportunity to push c4, bishop to e2, and c3 to destroy white's pawn structure. Now, playing b3 for white here would actually weaken this dark square, so he did not play that. Now, notice I am now creating counterplay. Now, by playing queen to a5 and pushing my pawn to the queen side, by getting my pieces more active and having initiatives or activity, my opponent attacks the king side. I don't just sit and wait. I also have counterplays in the queen side. So after my move c3, white did not just just ignore that move, and he plays his own bishop to h6. Now he wanted to exchange these bishops of mine on g7 to weaken my dark square. Now I played knight to e4 to centralize my knight and to activate it. Putting it to e4 would actually make it more active than its position on f6. So again, this is just logical reasoning here. So white captures my bishop to g7, or on g7, I played king takes g7, and he plays g5 to lock the king side. Now, After g5, I played king to g8. I was worried about the tempo on queen to h6 and a possible rook lift there. Rook to g4, going to h4. Now, he plays queen h6 still. I played rook to d8. I wanted to put my knight to f8 to have a defense on h7. Now, remember he can't just capture my knight on d7 because I can always play queen to b4 and there will be no solution for him, or he can't prevent my checkmate on b2 after that. So this knight on e5 should be kept there so that he could always defend knight d3 to guard this b2 checkmate, right? Okay, so after my move rook to d8, he plays rook g4. So he lifted this rook to put to h4. So I then transfer my knight to f8 already to protect the h7 pawn. And then he just continued to play queen or rook to h4. Now, my next move is to make my other rook or my rook more active by playing rook to d6. Now, the plan is to play rook to b6 and to add some pressure to his king. Now, after my move rook to d6, maybe he was afraid and worried, so he played b3. And there is this weakness on the dark square. I played queen to a3. Now, there's only one move to defend checkmate, and that is knight to d3. Now, maybe his idea is to put his other knight to e5, to g4, and then to f6. And to be honest, that is a very heavy thing to defend. So, but I find some cute tactic here because I noticed that this is the knight here is the only defender on this b2 checkmate. So I played knight to f2. Now, he can't just move his rook away, right? Because I can just capture this knight to d3 and checkmate the next move. So the only way to proceed for white is knight f to e5. Okay? Now I played rook to b6. And then he's got a chance to run away with his rook, so rook to f1. Quiet but aggressive move here. A simple rook to b5. Now, after I played rook to b5, my opponent resigns. Why? Now, there is no way to prevent checkmate when the rook comes to a5, and also I capture this a2 pawn and going to a1. And the king will just move to c1, and there's no escape for white's king. That's why my opponent resigns. Now, there you can see the value of creating your own play to stay alive on the board. And with some pressures, just like here, what happened here, your opponent may not be able to keep up with his own attacks. And the position may become equal, and worse for the opponent, the table may be turned and put him in the defensive end. This illustration is another example of understanding the value of counterplay. Here, white has launched a kingside attack, but kept his king at the center. Okay, so for black's position is somehow cramped and he needs to create some countermeasures to stay in the game. So he has the choice to take the pawn on a5. That's free pawn right there. But having an extra pawn is not a priority right now, since white will play h4 to h5 and g6 soon, and black might have a hard time to recover. Instead of looking to gain material, black plays a more logical move, knight takes d4. And after bishop takes d4, e5, a breakthrough in the center. Now, after f takes e5, there's e takes or d takes e5, or maybe another way to proceed is knight takes e5, and we have knight f3 threat, and that is actually activity, and also making the knight more active. So typically, white players will not capture the pawn, but rather place bishop to e3. Now e takes f4, bishop takes f4, and knight e5, again, with the threat of knight f3, that's activity. It's same story there. Bishop to e2, and bishop to e6. And black will play rook to c8 next. Now, white's king is still in the center of the board, and he can just castle queenside because this pawn here on a5 will be hanging and defended. So, in other words, in this kind of position, after some exchange in the middle of the board, black has equalized and looks like white's attack has been spoiled by counterplay, or for black's moves, keeping his pieces active and creating some threats then and then. This is another position where white is clearly better. Now, notice he owns the rook here, or the rooks here own the d file and the c file, and these rooks are more active than black, right? And also, there's a plan also to dominate even more this seventh rank. So also notice these three pawns right here versus black's sole pawn, and if the end game arrives right now, and white manages to push these pawns, it's going to be a win for sure for white. For black, he needs to keep his defense firm while making his activity pieces or pieces activity uh, better, and playing some not passive moves but rather some moves that create counterplay towards white. So rook to b8 is the best move for black here. Now making one of the rooks active and creating activity. Now white plays b3. Now white reacts. Rook to b4. It's another active move that's being active and also activity again. White continues his plan with rook c to c7. Now, white continues his plan right now. So, but black, or white rather missed the opportunity for a tactic here because he can't still capture the f7 pawn because, for example, he captures that f7 pawn. We have a bishop to b2, and this pawn is going to be taken away. So, he needs to react with a threat of rook to f4 capturing this pawn. If he plays f3, then black could play h3 and these pawns will be weak. So the better move here for white is actually rook to d2. Now black can play bishop to g5, and after king d1, rook to g4. Notice how simple rook moves by black created pressure to white after some few moves on the board. So these pawns will be one of those pawns will be actually taken away from white. Now this is again the result of keeping your pieces active and continuously creating activity. You just can't refuse to be passive. This is a simpler and more straightforward example of counterplay. Now, white's pawns on c4 and e4 have created a central bind. If black wants to break this and gain some active play, he has to lash out with either d6 to d5 or b7 to b5. In the present situation, a6, preparing the idea or preparing to move to b5 is more fitting. So after white castles, there is b5. Now, forces white's hand with knight to d5. Now, capturing the pawn with right there with a bishop to b5 is actually a bad move because there is a rook takes c3 and this bishop will be hanging, right? So the best move here for white is to play knight to d5. And after queen takes d2, bishop takes d2, and knight takes d5, the game is equal. In this position, black is so aggressive by using his pawns in front of his king to attack. Now, white is hopeful that this ambitious plan by black could backfire because normally, moving the pawns in front one's king could actually weaken the position and expose the king to attack. But here, black plays g4, or should we say g5 to g4 to attack the knight on f3. Now, the move knight to d2 is perfectly fine. But black might be able to continue pushing if some retreating move like this one is to be played. Black could go h4 to open the h file along with king to g7 and put his rook to the h file, and maybe that's just not easy to defend from. Now, instead, white chooses a more aggressive move, a counterplay at the center with d4. If g takes f3, then the bishop on c5 will be taken, and the knight on b6 is still hanging. If it moves somewhere, then white could take on d5. Now, white is not worried about the locking down of f3 here f3 pawn, since there's a bishop guarding the light squares. Okay, so h4 is also not a big deal here for white, since there's always, for example, knight moves to d7, and you know, queen takes the pawn, and h4. There's bishop to d3 to harass the queen, and there's only one square to retreat to, and that is queen to e6, because if queen moves somewhere else, the knight will be undefended, right? So queen to e6, and after the exchange of queens, this pawn on f3 will fall. So let me go back. So pawn takes d4, knight takes d4 has been played here. Okay, so the queen is attacked, so queen moves to f6. Bishop to g2, attacking the rook. So rook goes to d8 to protect the pawn. Also, that is heavy pressure there. Now, rook to c1. Now, no h4 for black here because this is going to be hanging. Okay, so bishop to f8, knight ce2, knight e5, knight f4, h4 has been played now because there's now knight defending that g4, but there's rook c7. Now, the game is far from over, but white has the edge here due to fewer pawn islands, and he also owns the c file here with the rook. This is an isolated pawn also. That's going to be long-term target for white. Okay, so again, the thing about counterplay is to refuse to be passive and act like a sitting duck for the opponent. It's about being active and creating your own activity to threaten the enemy's position. Here, I have an amazing puzzle that allows black to, steal a win from his opponent by activating his piece that led to an instant tactical win. So let me just flip the board. Okay, so white is obviously better here. Black has an uncastled king in the center, is surrounded by white's pieces, and if we are to assess this position, this is a very big plus already for white. And white will soon find a way to checkmate black and win, right? But black refuses to play passively. Can you guess what the black player played here? You can pause the video and play like a grandmaster. Alright, congratulations if you saw the move knight to f4. Now, this is actually the engine's best move also. And this is what black actually played. Now, the threat is pretty obvious. Go to knight e2. And white will just sack up a rook there. Now, but there's another hidden trap that this move is actually looking into. In the game, white fell for the trap and lost instantly. After the move knight to f4, white played bishop to d8 because he's also eyeing his own checkmate. Okay, so but this is completely missed by black, or by white rather. The idea of knight f4 in there. There is a brilliant move that instantly ended the game. Can you play the brilliant finishing move by black here? Alright, thank you for your answers. The brilliant move is queen to f1. If king takes the queen, then we have rook to h1 checkmate. If rook takes queen, then we have knight to e2 checkmate. Notice how a simple knight f4, or simply activating the knight, has guarded some key squares or key square, and activating the knight, and in fact a hidden threat there has been created. A hidden activity led to a tactical win for black. So if you happen to play worse position, go defend your position, but also keep in mind to keep your pieces as active as possible. By making them active, there is higher potential for activity or initiative that could put pressure to your opponent. Again, active and activity.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.